The bell above the grocery store door jingled like it always did, sharp, annoying, and slightly too cheerful for a place where minimum wage dreams went to die. I wiped my hands on my apron, forced a smile, and took my place behind the register. Another day. Another 100 strangers. Then he walked in. Pressed suit. Expensive watch. The kind of walk that screamed, "I own this place even if I've never been here before." He didn't look at anyone, just went straight for the most expensive items on the shelves: smoked salmon, imported wine, aged cheese. His basket weighed more than my self-worth. When he reached my checkout line, he didn't say a word. Just dumped the items and looked down at his phone. "Good evening, sir," I said, scanning the barcode on a bottle of Merlot. "Find everything okay?" He sighed, loudly, as if my voice was the static between him and something more important. "Young man," he said without looking up, "just scan. Don't talk." My fingers froze mid-scan. The customer behind him shifted uncomfortably. A mother with a toddler. She gave me a soft smile, maybe out of pity. I swallowed my pride and kept scanning. Then, the final blow. He held up his Amex like a sword and said loud enough for others to hear, "I hope one day you'll work hard enough to use one of these. Not just swipe it for others." I looked up, into his cold, judging eyes. I wanted to say something. Anything. But I didn't. Because I was the grocery store boy. And he was someone the world respected. As he left, I stared at the door. A single thought pounding in my head. One day, he'll know who I am. I stood in front of the operating room doors, dressed in scrubs, gloves snapped tight, my surgical mask resting just beneath my nose. My name was embroidered on the chest pocket, Dr. Elijah Brooks, cardiothoracic surgery. Inside, a team was prepping for the procedure. The patient's vitals were steady for now. A man in his late 50s. Critical heart failure. He needed a quadruple bypass, immediately. I had performed this surgery dozens of times. It was routine for me. But this time, my hands trembled before I walked in. Not from fear. From recognition. The chart in my hand bore a name I hadn't heard in 10 years, but I could never forget it. Daniel Whitmore. The man with the Amex. The man who told me to shut up and scan. I peered through the glass window of the operating room. He was lying there, unconscious, wires connected to machines keeping him alive. He looked smaller now. Weaker. Helpless. "Doctor," a nurse called. I nodded slowly and stepped through the doors. As the anesthesiologist confirmed sedation, and the instruments were laid out on the tray, I took a deep breath. "You asked me to just scan. Today, I'm the one holding your heart in my hands." But I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because this was no longer about revenge. It was about something far deeper. Redemption. Mercy. And proving, once and for all, that I was never just the grocery store boy. Back when I was still working that register, I had dreams, not delusions, just stubborn hopes. I'd study at night in the employee break room, medical textbooks stacked next to packs of chewing gum and discount candy. Customers would come and go, and I'd smile politely, never letting them see how much I wanted out. But that night, after Daniel humiliated me, I sat behind the store in the alley, head in my hands. The night manager brought out trash bags. I was in the way. As always. I remember looking at the stars, or trying to. The city lights drowned them out. Still, I whispered a promise. One day, I'll be more than this. I'll be the one they look to when it really matters. The next morning, I applied for community college. The tuition was steep. I worked double shifts. Slept on buses. Studied between deliveries. No one believed in me. Not even my own father. Medicine? With those grades, he'd scoff. But I remembered the Amex. The smirk. The judgment. It became fuel. That humiliation. It carved something in me that couldn't be unmade. By the time I was accepted into med school, I'd stopped scanning groceries. But I never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. Now, standing over the man who made me feel that way, I realized something chilling. He had no idea who I was. Not yet. But he would. The surgery prep was almost complete. My assistant reviewed the scans while the ortex adjusted the lighting. I should have been focusing on the grafting sequence, the bypass routes, the angle of the incision. Instead, I saw flashes, memories like ghosts, of that night behind the store. Of scraping together coins for bus fare. Of falling asleep in the back of a lecture hall after working all night. The past wasn't just with me. It was me. "Dr. Brooks?" one of the nurses asked, holding out a sterilized scalpel. I took it. Stepped closer. The hum of machines was steady. The room was cool, sterile. But inside me, everything churned. I looked down at Daniel Whitmore. I was about to cut open the chest of the man who once saw me as less than human. And he still didn't know. "Let's begin," I said. I made the first incision. Not with anger, but with precision. The scalpel glided through skin and tissue. My mind, however, was still cutting through years of doubt. I thought of my mother's voice. Her worried eyes every time I left for night shifts. Her pride the day I got my white coat. She was the only one who ever saw who I could be. Each step of the procedure was methodical: sternotomy, pericardium retraction, vein harvesting. But there was a moment, right before we stopped the heart, when I paused. I looked at his face. Still unaware. Still untouched by the realization. He was vulnerable now. Exactly as I had been, emotionally, a decade ago. Except this time, the difference was stark. He had no control. I had it all. The surgery was a success. It lasted 4 hours. No complications. Clean grafts. Beautiful stitching. I scrubbed out, removed my gloves, and leaned on the edge of the sink. My reflection stared back at me, older, steadier, someone who no longer needed to prove anything. Yet something still burned inside. Later, I visited him in recovery. He was groggy, eyes half open. Machines beeped softly beside him. A nurse adjusted his fore. He turned slightly. Saw me. I stepped forward and introduced myself gently. "Mr. Whitmore. I'm Dr. Elijah Brooks. I performed your surgery." His eyes blinked slowly. Then widened. It took a second. But I saw it. The flicker of memory. He recognized me. His lips parted slightly. Dry. Pale. He tried to speak, but the words came out like a whisper lost in wind. "I know you." I nodded once. "Yes. You do." His brows furrowed, trying to piece together the image in front of him with a memory buried under a decade of boardrooms, bonuses, and oblivion. "The grocery store," he said slowly. I waited. "That boy." I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. His hand trembled slightly on the blanket. He wasn't weak from the surgery, not just that, but from the weight of realization. I was cruel," he admitted. The nurse quietly slipped out, sensing the shift. I sat down beside him. "You probably don't even remember what you said." He turned his head toward the window, the evening light casting long shadows across his face. "I remember more than I wish I did." There was silence. Heavy, but not bitter. "Why didn't you say something back then?" he asked. "Because I knew one day, I wouldn't have to." I visited him daily during his recovery. Not out of duty, my shift had ended. Not out of vengeance, that fire had cooled. But something in me needed closure. And maybe, so did he. He spoke more on the third day. Told me he had lost his wife 5 years ago. His only son hadn't spoken to him in 2. That heart failure wasn't the only thing hollowing him out. "I spent my life chasing numbers," he confessed. profit margins, stock prices. Never people. I listened. Not because I needed to hear his guilt, but because he needed to say it. It took nearly dying, he continued, to realize how alive I never was. I wanted to tell him that I forgave him. But instead, I said, "Then don't waste the second chance." He looked at me then, really looked. Not through me. Not past me. But at me. The story broke a week later. Renowned CEO saved by doctor he once publicly humiliated. A journalist had gotten wind of it from a nurse. The hospital tried to keep it quiet, but someone leaked it. They asked for interviews. For photo ops. A chance to capitalize on the irony. I declined every one. Daniel, however, didn't. He went public, but not to tell a story of redemption. To apologize. He stood at a press podium, heart still healing beneath his crisp new suit, and looked into the cameras with wet eyes. "I once humiliated a young man who worked behind a grocery store register. 10 years later, he held my heart in his hands, and saved my life." He paused. Swallowed hard. This is not just about forgiveness. It's about never underestimating the worth of another human being. I watched it from the break room, coat still on, coffee in hand. He didn't say my name. But he didn't have to. Everyone knew who he meant. And more importantly, so did I. 2 days after the press conference, a letter arrived at my office. It wasn't printed. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, shaky, imperfect, but deeply intentional. It was from Daniel. In it, he wrote things that silence could never say. About regrets he carried like stones. About the boy he once belittled who had become the man who saved him. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he wrote. "But I needed you to know that moment changed me, not the surgery, but you. Your grace. Your silence. Your strength." I read it 3 times. Not because I needed to, but because something in those words felt like a chapter closing. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer of my desk. Not to forget, but to remember how far I'd come. And how far someone else still could. Months passed. He recovered well. I saw him occasionally, not as a patient, but as a visitor. He started volunteering at the hospital, helping with fundraising events and community outreach. Sometimes, we'd speak in the hallway, short nods turning into long conversations. He no longer wore the same tailored arrogance. His suits remained, but his posture had softened. His eyes, once sharp and dismissive, now searched for meaning instead of flaws. He asked me about my journey. My struggles. He listened with the focus of a man learning how to be human again. It was strange, the way forgiveness could unfold, not in a moment, but in layers. One evening, he invited me to dinner. It was awkward at first. We sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant. The same man who once reduced me to nothing now raised his glass and said, "To new beginnings." I didn't toast out of politeness. I toasted because I believed it. Over pasta and old stories, he shared the battles behind his success, a childhood shaped by neglect, a father whose approval never came, a need to dominate every room because he never felt enough in any of them. And for the first time, I didn't see a man who once humiliated me. I saw a man who was humiliated by life, long before he ever met me. We parted with a handshake. And a strange feeling in my chest. Not vengeance. Not victory. But peace. Weeks later, I returned to that grocery store. Not for groceries, just to see it. It looked smaller now. The aisles felt narrower. The smell of stale bread and bleach hit me like a flashback. I walked to register 3. My register. A young man stood behind it. Nervous. Polite. I smiled at him. He smiled back. "First job?" I asked. "Yeah," he laughed. "Trying to survive it." I nodded. "Hang in there. You'll get through more than you think." As I left, I placed a $50 tip in the jar beside him. A small gesture. But I remembered how far a gesture could reach. That place, once a symbol of shame, was now a monument to resilience. A few months later, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Daniel was launching a scholarship, one that would support underprivileged youth pursuing careers in medicine. He called it the Grocery Boy Fund. The name startled me at first. Then it made me laugh. Not out of mockery, but out of awe. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note. "You were the beginning of this. Come speak at the launch. Tell them what's possible." I hesitated. Then said yes. Not because I needed the spotlight, but because someone in that crowd might be carrying their own Amex moment, and they'd need to know it doesn't define them. The auditorium was packed. Students, families, donors. Daniel took the stage first. He told the story, not just of his failure, but of my mercy. When he introduced me, the applause was warm. Not explosive. Just real. I stood at the podium. Cleared my throat. I was once told to just scan and not speak. I began. Tonight, I get to speak, not because I fought back, but because I held on. I told them about the humiliation. The grind. The nights no one saw. And the moment I held a man's heart in my hands, not with vengeance, but with purpose. "You are not where you came from," I said. "You are what you rise to." Somewhere in the back, a young boy with a badge that read volunteer wiped his eyes. I saw myself in him. And I knew. My story had just become someone else's beginning. One rainy afternoon, Daniel invited me to a small cafe. No cameras. No speeches. Just two men and 2 mugs of coffee. "I wanted to thank you again," he said quietly. I shrugged. "You've said that 100 times. "No," he insisted. "Not for saving my life. For not holding it against me." I studied him. He was thinner now. Slower. But more alive than I had ever seen him. "You changed," I said. "I had to," he replied. "Your kindness gave me no excuse not to." We sat in silence after that. Comfortable silence. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket. A small black card. American Express. He slid it across the table and smiled. "Thought you might want this. I don't use it anymore." I laughed. "You're kidding." "Symbolic," he said. "To remind us both how small things can become big lessons." I didn't take it. I didn't need to. But I understood what it meant. Months later, at a community event, I gave another talk. The room was filled with hopeful eyes and restless ambition. Afterwards, a boy about 16 approached me. He was shy. Skinny. Wore oversized shoes and a nervous smile. "Dr. Brooks," he said softly. "I work nights at a grocery store. I saw your video." I smiled. So did I, years ago, from the other side of the counter. He looked down. "Sometimes I feel like no one sees me." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Someone will. Maybe not today. But if you keep going, if you keep learning, one day, they'll see you and never forget it." His eyes watered. I just needed to hear that. And I realized. Every humiliation we survive becomes a hand we offer someone else. Even if they don't know it yet. Years passed. I advanced in my career, eventually becoming head of surgery. I published papers, trained residents, and saved more lives than I could count. But no achievement ever felt as powerful as that one quiet moment in the recovery room, when a man recognized the boy he tried to belittle. Daniel and I remained in touch. He retired early, devoted himself fully to the scholarship. He even started visiting schools with me, sharing his mistakes so others could learn. He once said to me, "My legacy isn't what I built in business. It's what I nearly destroyed, and what you rebuilt with mercy." We both knew, the fund, the talks, the lives changed, none of it would have happened if hate had been met with hate. I returned to the store one last time. Not as a customer. Not as a memory chaser. But because they were closing it down. A new supermarket chain had bought the property. It would be torn down in a month. I walked to aisle 3. Dusty shelves. Empty fridge cases. Silent registers. And there it was, the exact spot where I stood all those years ago. I closed my eyes. I saw him. I saw me. And I whispered a thank you, not to the man who mocked me, but to the moment that broke me just enough to rebuild stronger. Then I smiled, turned around, and walked out. Never looking back. Because some stories don't end where they started. They rise. Sometimes in life, the very moments that hurt us the most become the seeds of our greatest strength. This story wasn't just about a grocery store boy or a powerful businessman. It was about pride, pain, forgiveness, and the quiet resilience we all carry inside. Because every single one of us has felt invisible at some point. Every one of us has stood at the checkout line of life, waiting for someone to see us, to believe in us. But maybe the real power isn't in being seen, it's in choosing who we become, even when no one is watching. We live in a world that moves fast. People judge based on what you wear, where you work, or how much you earn. But as we've seen, titles fade. Positions shift. And one act of kindness can echo far louder than years of silence. So if you're the grocery store boy right now, keep going. If you're the one who once judged, there's still time to change. And if you've ever been broken, remember, cracks let the light in. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone, or of yourself, share it. Let it be the reminder someone else needs today. Don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories like this one. And if you believe in second chances, in growth, and in the quiet power of humility, leave a comment, hit the like button, and send this to someone who needs to hear it. Your story matters too. And maybe, it's just beginning.